Hi, welcome to my review for The Final Empire, which is the first book of Brandon Sanderson's The Mistborn trilogy. So, why did I read this? Well, like many people, I'd been watching Sanderson's videos on YouTube about writing, and I thought, this guy's pretty famous for writing. I should read some of his work. I know people who said his writing was great and he wrote great books. And I thought, well, I'll buy his trilogy and give it a read and see what it's like. So, a little bit about Sanderson. He started off his career finishing off the Wheel of Time series because the author died 14 books, and I think he wrote like the last two or three. He then went on to have his own book, Elantris, published. Then he wrote the Mistborn series, which this is one of. He wrote a children's series called Alcatraz, and then he wrote his big series, which is called the Stormlight Archive. A lot of people say the Stormlight Archive is his best work. He is super prolific, so he writes and writes and writes and writes a lot of material, and sometimes he has two books going at once. It's pretty crazy, pretty impressive guy. Talks a lot about writing. Does videos on writing, podcasts. Now, a lot of his work is set in the Cosmere universe, which is the one universe where everything takes place, and this book is, as well as the Stormlight Archive and many other things. So, what's the plot of this book? Basically, the plot of this book, it's a heist story. So, it's a heist story with a twist. It mainly follows a criminal gang of these people called Scar, who are like the peasants or the serfs of this world. They're the beleaguered class. So this crew of sort of criminals and ex-criminals plan to do a heist which they hope is going to help bring down the Dark Lord of the world. And the Dark Lord of the world is called the Dark World, which makes it easy to identify him. The Dark Lord and the nobility minority rule over this Scar. The main character, Kelsier, he's half Scar, half noble. So he's sort of got a foot in both worlds, but he has a lot of empathy with the Scar and is trying to help them out. Because he's half noble, he has magical powers. In this world, they're called Elemency. There's another character called Vin, and various other characters around assist him in the mission and are part of it all. So what do I think of the plot? For the most part, it's essentially the hero's journey, I think, in particular with Vin. And she rises up from street level and then goes on and does all these fantastic things, which I won't tell you about because I might spoil the story. The plot was good. I really liked the way everything was intertwined with the world and you saw different things, and it's quite complex and really discussed lots of details with the plot. You really get the essence and a feel for the unfortunate life of the Scar and the way they're sort of put down upon by the nobility and the Dark Lord. It's pretty awful. Pacing, I thought, was okay. I thought it sort of slowed in the first part of the middle and then picked up and then was more exciting towards the end. I've seen people say it was a page turner and they couldn't put it down. I wouldn't say that. It was definitely interesting, and parts of it were faster and parts of it was slower, I thought. Now, I've been talking about the Mistborn. It's called the Mistborn series. Just to add, Mistborn are in the title are a type of Elemencer, and they're the ones with wide-ranging magical abilities, and they're particularly powerful. So that's the plot. The writing, Sanderson's writing, it's not amazingly ornate. It's simple and easy to read. I didn't really have a big problem with it, but yes, he's not an incredible or amazing writer. I think some people have said that his writing gets better because this is, sort of one of his earlier works. But overall, it's got lots of fans, so obviously his writing's pretty good. I did like how a lot of the themes of human deprivation, class structure, rebellion, privilege, all those themes came in through the writing, and I thought they were great. He really brings to life I thought, the plight of the Scar in the world. You really empathise with them for them. Now, the characters I really liked, Kelsier and Vin, I think are the two main characters, and they sort of jumped between one and the other. Kelsier comes across as a man under pressure. He's organising things. He's a strategist, but he's got lots of powers. But he's human, and you sort of feel for him. You really get the mission he's on. Because he's Scar and noble, he's got his foot in both worlds, so he's not quite one or the other. He's a military leader, and things don't always go to plan, and you feel for him at times. However, for me, Vin was the favourite. She's an underdog. She's a person who's lived on the streets at times. She hasn't had food. She's been assaulted. Has a terrible life, and you really feel for her. You really have a lot of empathy for her. And she builds up her powers and becomes something bigger than she is at the start. I won't go into that too much. I don't want to spoil it. But Vin is great. Definitely my favourite character. And I think a lot of people do like Vin. I preferred Vin over Kelsier. Apart from these two, the rest I thought were a little bit two-dimensional. You sort of get this Elementor with this power, this Scar rebel leader that does this. But they're not really, you don't really know much of their background, and it doesn't go into a lot of their characters. I don't know, it wasn't too much of an issue, because I did like the two main characters, and they're certainly, I think, quite well developed, particularly Vin. And then there's the villains as well, who are pretty good as well. Although you don't get a lot of detail about them, but I thought they were pretty good villains. The world building was great, and everyone says a lot about world building of Sanderson. He's known for his world building. The class structure of the world is brilliant. Mostly his society is human, except for the odd creatures. So it's a medieval-esque sort of society with some magic and some non-human creatures. The world is a dystopian world, and ash is constantly falling from the sky, so it's sort of dark, intertwined with the fact of the plight of the poor Scar, and it's a pretty bleak place. Lots of comments have been made about his magic system. As I said, it's called Allomancy, and it involves the swallowing and burning of metals. People who do that then get magical abilities. You get different metals, give you different abilities. I loved it. It was really great. You really get a feel for it, the detail. It's almost like a real science in the way it works. It's just fantastic. Probably one of my favourite magic systems in anything I've read. And I think a lot of people often reference it when they're talking about magic systems and reference Sanderson and the way he develops his magic systems. So, the good and the bad. The good, there's a lot of good. The world is great. The two main characters are fantastic. The magic system is great. The plot's pretty good. The themes of the class struggle and the plight of the Scar and the rebellion is all fantastic. I really love that aspect of it. You get a real feel for the class distinctions in this novel that you don't really get in any other novel, I thought. So I really loved that. I thought it was really good. The bad, two minor things. The background characters, apart from Vin and Kelsier, like I said, a bit 2D. And secondly, I thought the pacing gets a bit slow, around the middle. But, overall, they're only two minor things. Overall, I thought it was a pretty good book. So, in terms of my rating, I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 stars. It's not the perfect novel that a lot of people say. Like, it's not a 5, but it's definitely up there. It's definitely a really good book. You see it on a lot of people's top 10 lists, and I think it definitely belongs there. There were times I thought this is just a really great book. So, 4 out of 5, that's my rating and that's my review for The Final Empire, the Mistborn trilogy, my review for the Fantasy Review.